Can I share a quick image with you?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Okay.
Oh,
Cool. So it is a Trojan horse, and picture the guardians of the city opening the gate and looking at the Trojan horse. The guardians of the city gate are the dictators, and they are the people who control society. And they're looking at this big Trojan horse, and the Trojan horse is Bitcoin. And they're like, this is awesome. Let's get this thing in here. What they don't realize is inside the belly of the Trojan horse is freedom. So for me, Bitcoin represents freedom in many ways because it's kind of like a virus. It's something that can only spread. It's a genie that can't go back in the bottle. And when I've been looking at how, especially authoritarian leaders around the world, who are enemies of the United States, have been sort of turning to Bitcoin in different ways, what they don't realize is that the staffers, the employees, the bureaucrats that they assign to steal Bitcoin, like for example, North Korea hacks South Korean cryptocurrency exchanges, steals Bitcoin, they sell it in China. Similar things have happened in Venezuela, Iran, etc. What they don't realize is that Bitcoin is like this mind virus, and the people that the regime has assigned to carry out these tasks are learning about this money that the government doesn't control, and they're going to use it too. And over time, that's going to erode the power of the authoritarian state, and it's going to shift the balance back towards the people. And that's something that's very powerful. And I think it's something that inspires me. And it's something that obviously will play out over many, many decades, perhaps over hundreds of years. But this is how I wanted to start off the conversation, with this concept of Bitcoin as a Trojan horse against arbitrary power. That people from authoritarian societies with weak currencies understand Bitcoin much more quickly than people from London or Tokyo or New York. And they're much more open minded about it. And when you go to somebody in New York and you say, hey, here's money the government doesn't control, they're like, what are you, crazy? When you talk to somebody from Harare about this, they're like, oh, let's sit down. Tell me more. I'm very interested. So it hints at or depicts this bifurcation in the world between the haves and the have nots in a way, or at least the people who live with the privilege of the dollar system or the euro system or the yen system versus those who live under regimes where the currency is debased in a much more frequent way that has been totally normalized, and where the governments steal from the population in a much more brazen way. So I think this is one of the reasons why you see the interest from the Cubans, the interest from Nigerians, the interest from Venezuelans, the interest from Chinese, etc. It's almost like the momentum and the capital of Bitcoin, is not in San Francisco. It's not in Paris. It's not in Berlin. It's out in Lagos. It's in Caracas. It's in Moscow.
Right. And
That the restrictions that governments have placed on their population in the name of fighting COVID have been very disastrous in a lot of countries. And I'm not going to have. I don't really want to go into a debate about that particular, but let's just say that the situation is getting very grim. It already was very grim for a lot of people. But now their small businesses have been destroyed, their livelihoods have been uprooted, imports have been reduced, tourism has been reduced, exports have been reduced. I mean, it's tough out there in a lot of countries that don't have the U.S. dollar, that don't have the U.S. stock market, that can't just hop on their phone and invest in a slice of Apple stock. I mean, this is such a luxury, to live here in the United States. Really, no matter where you are on the socioeconomic ladder, like there are opportunities for you where there are not in similar castes in other countries. So those are people that are going to find their way to Bitcoin because it gives something that really we've never had before, which is a quality of opportunity when it comes to money. I mean, again, yes, the billionaires and the governments and the corporations, they can buy a lot of Bitcoin. Great, go for it. But they can't change the rules. They can't print more than 21 million, and they can't prevent us from sending it to each other, and they can't prevent anyone from using the network. And that to me is like so revolutionary. I don't believe in equality of outcome. I think that's a myth. But I do believe in equality of opportunity. And I just think it's never really been possible before. There are things like the Constitution, the Bill of Rights that try to achieve it, right? And it's always a struggle, right? And there may be societies you'd point to that are like Norway, where maybe they've gotten pretty close, right? But really, at the end of the day, Bitcoin's like the real McCoy when it comes to equality of opportunity. I mean, it really is about as close as we're going to get. I mean, basically, as the money system has gone all digital, money's turned from a bearer asset to a mechanism of surveillance and control, and cash is disappearing, and I think people are going to miss cash and they're going to forget how important it was. And that's why this quest for digital cash is so important for human rights. And we're going to need it just as much here in the United States as everywhere else. I just think it's a little more urgent elsewhere, and people are figuring it out sooner in terms of a use case. I mean, again, most people in the United States, EU, they think of Bitcoin as, majority, a speculative store of value, basically, as an investment, as a luxury. For Michael Saylor, for Raoul Pal, et cetera, Bitcoin's a luxury. I mean, that one guy lives in the Cayman Islands. I mean, what does he care? But for people out there, who don't have access to the Cayman Islands, who can't just go there and hang out, where they are subject to a fiat currency that is debased continuously, and they can't access the international system. They really, it's hard for them to get dollars. Maybe they live behind sanctions. It's not even their fault. I mean, think about Iranians. 70 million Iranians live under sanctions, and they're not even responsible for the evil acts of their government. They didn't get to vote. They don't live in a democracy. So they're sitting there. They can't use Apple products. They can't connect to the international economy, but Bitcoin gives them this way out, right? So I do think it's incredibly powerful what's happening. It is this peaceful revolution, but it's a very quiet one. And the media hates to acknowledge this. The media doesn't understand Bitcoin. And it really has made me very jaded, because I normally, in other fields, let's say, I'm very pro-journalism. I love journalism. I love the art of journalism. I love investigative reporters. But they really have just missed it on Bitcoin. And obviously, you all have been charting this for a decade plus, how many times they've announced it dead, et cetera, et cetera. And good journalists who I respect don't get it. And it's just such a mystery to me. You know what I mean?